otherwise known as the Dramatic Otaku, and welcome to my Halloween special. I am, well, I was going to cosplay Tomiya, but I don't have a brown wig and my hair is like this, so I decided I am that goth chick in every horror movie that you think goes to the end and then ultimately doesn't go to the end of the film. Today we are going to be me and Mimikyu, because Mimikyu is my favourite Pokemon. We're going to be ranking and analysing all of my JUNJI Ito collection books. Now, we'll be doing this in two segments. We're going to be first going through the actual full chapter books. We have about 6 chapter books in heavy quotation marks. These are the ones with consistent storylines that are only those stories. So this is the likes of Gyo, Uzumaki, those kinds of stories. And as well, and the second section will be dedicated to the JUNJI Ito story collection books. Now, technically Lovesickness and Frankenstein could fall under the full book categories, but because they've got the story collection label, they're going to be put with the story collection rankings. So this video I will be not only explaining the plots to the main stories, but what I like about them, what I dislike about them, and ranking them in a bulleted list. Now I have 6 of the full story ones and 5 of the chapter books. Of course, fills and goes all over. That being said, I don't really celebrate Halloween. This is sort of going to be a one-time thing. This look is based off of Tomiya from the story Boy, with a little bit of a mix from Tomiya from Painter, where her face gets all slashed. I thought it'd be very fitting as I did my Tomiya cosplay video at the start of the year, and I also obviously am reviewing JUNJI Ito books. That being said, before this video starts, if you could please like and subscribe, that'd be much appreciated. My goal is to hopefully reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It's a little bit of an ask, but if you could like and subscribe and be a part of that journey, I would much appreciate it. Now, on to JUNJI Ito. So, jumping right into it, we have my collection of the full storybooks. Now, these are some of my biggest manga novels as well as some of my shortest manga novels that I have, and we're gonna jump right in with the first JUNJI Ito media that I consumed, that being JUNJI Ito's Cat Diary, Yon and Mu. Now this does qualify for this section, mainly because it only surrounds his cats. Now this, as I have said in the past, is probably the perfect way to get into JUNJI Ito. If you're too nervous to get into JUNJI Ito because, you know, he's the king of horror, or the king of manga horror, this honestly is the most perfect book. It is very placid. There isn't a lot of like gonna make you jump, gonna give you nightmare type stories in this, obviously because it's about cats. It's about his 2 cats or his cats that he's had in the past, right? I know recently that they released a collector's edition of Yon and Mu, which is a hardcover version with a coloured front, which while I don't particularly want, because while I am a collector, I like to just have the books so I can read them. So having the soft cover and the hardcover to me would be a bit redundant unless there's new content in the anniversary release. But personally, if you're looking to get into JUNJI Ito, this is a perfect start. It really encapsulates his art style about how he turns these cute little cats, these adorable, weird little cats of his, and how he turns them, even on the next page, into something absolutely crazy. And it really encapsulates how JUNJI Ito takes very mundane things in the real world and transforms it into something that's quite horrifying, as you see in his short stories and even in his long form stories. Concepts, ideas, even experiences of everyday life being turned into something horrific, this book absolutely encapsulates, because it's a fun little book that's very comedic about 2 cats. Personally on the ranking of the main books, I would say this is the perfect number 3. I think this takes the 3-4 spot, so the direct middle of the entire list just because of the fact that it's not a very shocking horror manga, but it is a very good read if you're looking to get into Junji Ito and are very nervous. It is a good jumping off point, and it is a classic Junji Ito novel. So this is probably gonna sit at 3 or 4 for me for now. Okay, next, continuing on with the softcover novels, is The Dissolving Classroom. Now, I have said that I picked this up being completely ignorant because I tried to pick up The Drifting Classroom, but no, I picked up The Dissolving Classroom because I saw it had Junji Ito and I thought it was the same book. It is not. The plotline of this entire story, I believe it's all one story. There is 2 stories at the end of this book, as there is with Gyo. There is 2 short stories at the end of this I'm not particularly fond of. I especially enjoy the one of the disappearing kids because it gives me very Uzumaki vibes, though the other one I'm not really fond of. It kind of comes out of nowhere. But the main plot of The Dissolving Classroom is about these 2 siblings here. This seemingly well put together kid is actually in cahoots with literal Satan, and if he apologizes to you, your brain melts. And so does the rest of your body. And this fucking mongrel drinks those remains, and the entire story goes through various different experiences of different characters as these 2 pass through their lives. As these 2 are obviously the bad guys. As with most of the name characters in these novels, these are the bad guys, really. Now, I had very mixed feelings about this. I did like that one of the main characters, or the main character from the very first short segment of this story, was brought back in a later segment, and it showed that she actually had brain damage from being apologized to by this guy, and that she had significant trauma because of it. And I don't know why I liked that so much. I guess just the continuation of it and bringing back a character that you didn't really expect to be brought back. I will give it props. That is a really good part of this that I like, weirdly enough. Out of the outstanding Junji Ito novels, this one isn't necessarily my favorite. It isn't hugely outstanding, and again, I picked it up thinking it was going to be The Drifting Classroom. In this entire list, I would probably have to put this at number 5, just because it's not my favorite, but I don't completely hate it. It doesn't completely revolt me, and I do semi-like one of the ending stories that is paired with The Dissolving Classroom. I just think that, I guess because it's a shorter volume, it's like went in a direction really fast that I didn't like. I think the thing that sort of this reminds me of is, or this child reminds me of, is the characters in the second portion of Love Sickness. There is this family that I don't particularly like that we will talk about when I talk about the collections, and she reminds me of them, as I bought this and read this after Love Sickness. And it's just the really quirky, weird characters that Junji Ito makes that I don't particularly like. And the thing that I like the least is that she's actually the sane one out of the 2 of them. So yeah, it also went really hard, really fast in a plotline that I really didn't expect, which I guess is part of the horror of it, but Dissolving Classroom will personally go at number 5 for me. Next is one of Junji Ito's more recent releases. This isn't his most recent release. I haven't been able to get Liminal Zone yet, but this is Censor. Now, this one actually disturbed me, and not disturbed me in a good way, if that makes sense. A lot of the books I talk about with Junji Ito, I like them because they disturb me in a semi-good way, where they shock me with the imagery or make me really think about stuff. I didn't particularly like this. It is very, if you have triggers for, like, first of all, space, it's cosmic horror. I really, really don't like space, so having a cosmic horror probably isn't my favorite. It's why I'm so hesitant on reading Hellstar Remina, though I probably am more willing to read that because the main thing that I think of when I see the cover for Hellstar Remina is that one Future Armor special that I really liked as a kid. So yeah, but Censor goes into a lot of topics that I'm not really fond of. There's first of all, there is religious imagery, the difference between Christianity and I can't think of the traditional religious practices of Japan right now, but there's a lot of like difference between that. There's a really weird time travel element, the inevitability of a time loop, talking about gods, the concept of, my brain is saying nihilism and it's not nihilism, it's like the opposite of nihilism, the constant cycle of life, that sort of stuff. It made me very like existential, or gave me existential dread, really. This book did, and like Censor is supposed to be like your sixth sense. The story is a series of like different snippets of this town that had supposedly been burned up by a volcano, and it suddenly starts erupting again, but it's erupting golden strands of hair, and this girl pops out, or this girl who was hiking, I haven't read this in a while, this girl who went hiking gets trapped by the volcano, is sent back into time to the town that had been supposedly wiped out by an eruption by this volcano. Head back to modern times. The volcano is spewing golden hair. This woman now has golden hair from memory. This woman is also an orphan. She comes into conflict with this guy who is supposed to be like this cult leader, and desperately wants her to join him, or wants to siphon her power. There's a third party who is sort of the narrator for the latter half of this story, and he is like there. He ggets intertwined because someone is stalking him, and he just gets dragged along with them. They go through this whole really weird ritual, and they see this fuck, and I don't like him because this is supposed to be some sort of representation of God, be this a dark god or what God is supposed to be. I don't know. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I don't like Censor. I really don't like Censor. It's kind of unnerving just to have this book personally. I was really excited for it and got really disappointed because I was really disturbed by it. Obviously it's a cosmic horror, the space, the existential dread, all of that, just, it didn't trigger me, but it made me really, really uncomfortable. It's also personally not that great of a story in comparison to his other works. Like, I'm going to talk about Gyo in a second, but even compared to Gyo, I like that story more than I like Censor, and for that, Censor is gonna go at number 6. I really don't like this book, and I want to get Liminal Space next, but yeah, it's gonna go under the Dissolving Classroom. And let me just put this into perspective. I significantly like this more than I like this book. If in terms of all of my rankings, if I combine which stories I like the most, Censor will always be dead last. And if I didn't spend a lot of money on this book and didn't want to make a full collection, with the exception of like the, what's it called, of Yonemu and all that, I wouldn't keep this book, but because I want that JUNJI Ito collection, I'm going to keep Censor. So that's how much I dislike Censor. Now that I had mentioned it, let's go into Gyo. Now, Gyo is the story of this guy and his girlfriend, and they're at a beach and they're fighting, and then something comes out of the water. Now, notable thing about the girlfriend is she has a really hypersensitive nose, and she goes ballistic if she smells anything bad. And the thing that crawled out of the ocean is a dead fish. So obviously she smells it and goes off at her boyfriend. They have a very on-off relationship, like a very unsteady, unhealthy relationship throughout Gyo. This girl is essentially run crazy because she just can't stop smelling the smell. And then they find out things are crawling out of the ocean, and it's like semi-dead sea animals with legs.
Nande?
And they don't know where the legs have come from. And the rest of the story goes through where these legs came from, how they attached to sea animals and crawled out of the ocean. The girl becomes trapped in her room and needs to get rid of the stench, which ultimately causes her to become, ironically, smelling fucking awful. She also like puts something on to try and stop the smell, and that's what gets her to this like swelled up state that I think at one point kills her, but then she gets back to life because these machines make the person who's attached, she gets attached to a machine. She gets attached to one of these fish machines. But whatever is on the machine is essentially in a state between dead and alive, and so she is put through fucking hell. This is a very gross out Junji Ito novel. I felt physically ill when reading this just because of the like amount of gross out stuff that was in it. Like this is more towards the end of the novel, but like you can see gases emitting out of people and it's really gross, and they're covered in boils and they're naked, and it's just really perturbing. And with the amount of gases that are emitted from people and the way that like the girlfriend ends up, it's just really gross, and I don't like it. Like, I can admit this is better than Censor, and I would read this over Censor any day, especially because of the two stories that are connected to the end of this book. And it's why I love this particular book so much, or sorry, why I tolerate this book so much. And that's because of the sad story of the principal post, which is a very, very short, like 2-page story. Very simple, very much you're kind of stuck in a position and you have to die there. But the highlight of this book is the Enigma of Amigara Fault. Now, the Enigma of Amigara Fault is quite possibly my favorite Junji Ito short story out there, and it plays with the fear of compulsion, and it's the fear of like you're compulsed to do something because that thing clearly is made for you. The short story goes through, basically there's been an earthquake, a mountain has split in half and shown some person-shaped holes. A lot of people see this on the news and see holes that they think are made for them. So they all start going to the Amigara Fault. And then people start climbing in to the holes, the people-sized holes that they think are made for them. And it isn't until months later that they come out the other side. And that imagery on the last page of this book was worth it. Personally, the gross out stuff in Gyo isn't my favorite, but it is tolerable in comparison to Gyo. I would prefer reading this over Dissolve mainly because of Amigara Fault at the end. I like the stories that are the complementary stories to Gyo. And yeah, I just prefer Gyo more than the Dissolving Classroom, but I will say I like it about the same as Junji Ito's Cat Diary. So for that, Gyo will go at number 4. Now, I know, Cardinal Sin, you've put the Cat Diary above the Amigara Fault. Personally, if the Amigara Fault story was in one of these short story collections, which I don't know if it is or ever will be since it's already been published in Gyo. If it was in one of the short story collections, then that short story collection would be the top short story collection, but because it's not, and because it's attached to Gyo, which again, it made me physically sick when I read it. In comparison, really, I mean this significantly better than this. I much prefer this, and it is one of Junji Ito's more renowned works, surprisingly. It's like one of the best, and I think the main reason probably is the Amigara fault, but a lot of people really like Gyo. Gyo has been adapted into a movie, but it was adapted quite poorly from memory. Like they changed the girlfriend character completely, and she didn't have the ending she was supposed to have and was like a girl boss and stuff like that. It's like, it's not the same story. Anyway, but yes, Gyo goes under Yonemu because Yonemu I can tolerate because it's a really cute story. But Gyo is too gross out for me personally. Probably could put it above Cat Diary for Amigara fault. Personally, Yonemu and Gyo are in the same like category. Like if I had to make it out of 5 instead of out of 6, Yonemu and Gyo would be number 3. That would be the same level essentially. Now moving on to obviously what is probably going to be my top 2 for the books. We've got Uzumaki and Tomiya. Now I have gone in depth on how much I love these stories. I have done literal assignments on Tomiya. I've done cosplays of Tomiya, of different versions of Tomiya. And Uzumaki, I fucking love it. The story of Uzumaki is our main protagonist has a friend. This friend's father suddenly, very suddenly, becomes obsessed with spirals. So much so that he turns himself into one, and a series of events occurs which brings the little town that she lives in into literal hell, being cursed by spirals. And we find out that this little town is essentially living in a spiral, both literally and figuratively. Living in a spiral in the sense of like a time loop. They are stuck in like almost like a liminal zone where time is constantly moving but also frozen at the same time. It's really weird. The ending is very open to interpretation, and I really like that. Or open to interpretation in a very like metaphorical sense, like what is the deity, what is the concept that is entrapping this town in spirals, what compulsed the protagonist's friend's dad to love spirals so much. And it does also play on the Amigara fault thing of compulsion again, which is something that like I think Junji Ito does really well, and his best works deal with compulsion and change and like very, very conceptual things. Like the whole horror of Uzumaki is spirals and things being made out of spirals, right? And yeah, I really, really enjoy Uzumaki. I love the concept of the book. This one, like I think I've read twice now. I will definitely read it again in the future. Out of all of these, my favorite story that also made me the sickest was probably the snail one. The most iconic panel from Uzumaki is obviously this bitch. Her actual story isn't all that interesting, but obviously it's an aesthetic. I was gonna cosplay her for this video, but I was just like, I can't be bothered. I cannot be fucked. Pretty much my favorite stories from Uzumaki, or my favorite chapters, is Twisted Souls, The Scar, and The Snail. The Snail is the gross out one that like, I like it for the same reasons I dislike Gyo. It's like the story that stuck out the most to me in Uzumaki, and I really dislike it because I'm not a huge fan of slugs and snails. Like, little weird fact about my family and my house, for some reason snails, or slugs, sorry, keep getting in, and they like to hang around the kitchen where I go at night when it's dark, so I keep stepping on fucking slugs. So snail disturbed me on a internal level because I could just imagine the texture of them. And yeah, so Uzumaki I really enjoy. Obviously it's gonna be one of my top 2. Will I put it at number 1? In terms of actual, like, it's a plot driven story, Uzumaki is top of the list, whereas Tomiya is very episodic. So I think, I don't know which one to do. I don't know which one should be top. Well, let's talk about Tomiya before we make a decision. So, obviously, Tomiya, it is Junji Ito's most iconic works. It is set in essentially 3 story arcs, this being the initial event, the transformation, and then the monster Tomiya. That's how most people who analyze the book typically deconstruct Tomiya as. The initial occurrence is the first story of Tomiya, where she is murdered and chopped into several, and I think that's the actual number is like 27 pieces, and distributed amongst her classmates to go dispose of the body. Only she reappears in class the next day, when everyone thinks she's dead. She drives her teacher to insanity because obviously she, the reason why she was killed is because everyone thought she was dead, and the teacher wanted her gone because they were fucking. Anyway, and she was going to ruin his life. Anyway, after Tomiya is murdered and reappears, everyone is shocked. Shock horror, where the fuck did she come from? And it leads to sneaking suspicions that Tomiya is a monster or is otherworldly. And this is reinforced at the end of the first story, where we see another Tomiya. The main story is going through the different lives of different Tomiyas as she's constantly... I misworded the summary, because it was like 5 in the morning when I recorded this. But basically the story of Tomiya is that because Tomiya has this curse put upon her, anyone that she interacts with falls under this curse and either stabs someone and has their life completely ruined, or is stabbed, murdered, or otherwise falls completely ill, or falls under Tomiya's curse where they are forced to live as Tomiya for the rest of their life. Which always ends in harm for someone. I fucking love tearing to shreds this book, so giving an actual, like, summary of all the stories is really difficult because I can't help but put in my, like, different thoughts about this book, because I've done, like, a feminist perspective of this book, like, her original story is, like, an allegory for grooming and sexual assault, and, victim blaming as well, whereas my least favorite, story Boy is like a reflection of that, where instead of Tomiya being the one who's the victim, she's actually acting completely malicious, which signifies the monster arc of Tomiya's story, where she's just like, you know what, I'm gonna be fucking evil, because it's been so many times where she's been killed and reincarnated that she's no longer Tomiya. She is the monster Tomiya. And yeah, so me having to like explain the story is really, really hard because I just can't keep my opinionated ass and former English major ass out of this book. I actually think for that, I might put it in second place just because I've analysed it so much that I can't suggest it without going into detail on the like thought processes I've had in analyzing the shit out of this book. I still enjoy it as a horror novel, and my favorite story is Assassins, which is named Murder in other places. So in my last video I like said 2 different looks from 2 different stories. They weren't. They were the same story, just named differently. I guess it's a regional thing. But it's called Assassins in Australia. At least with this edition, it's called Assassins. And that is my favorite story just because you see like fear and dread and oh my fucking god on Tomiya's face. In terms of my long form novels, Uzumaki is getting the top spot with Tomiya coming in second, mainly because Uzumaki I'm able to read more as a novel, and Tomiya I'm able to more so read as a like analytical piece, like analyze the shit out of this. Like while I enjoy it, and I do actually enjoy Murder or Assassins, it's a case of like I've picked apart this book so much that some of the fun is more so picking apart than it is reading it. While for me, for this, it's essentially just reading it that's the best part of it for me, personally. So the final tally for the long form Junji Ito novels goes as such. Uzumaki, Tomie, Junji Ito's Kato Yonamu equal in parts with Go, then The Dissolving Classroom, and Censor. And these are the main long form Junji Ito novels. Now we're getting into the story collections, and I picked up the two most recent ones, that being Deserter and Love Sickness. Now I am going to go into Love Sickness and Frankenstein first. So the main reason being is because these actually have long form stories in them. However, they have like two arcs or two like different long form stories in them, or they'll have like, no, they have like multiple long form connected stories in them. Whereas all the other ones, all of these ones are very episodic. These are like the top tier. What is Junji Ito's most recognizable works internationally? And then Desert is the most recent collection. So, and it's very similar to Shiva and Smashed. Whereas these two, obviously Frankenstein is Junji Ito's adaptation of Frankenstein, and Love Sickness is his own new like work. The actual story of Love Sickness itself goes for about 250 pages of the book. Personally, I kind of like Love Sickness as its own personal story. The one thing that like of this collection that I don't like is the strange this fucked me up the last time I did this in a video. The strange Hikizuri siblings. And it's that, it's the same thing as with the Dissolving Classroom. It's a bunch of deluded or deranged siblings, and it's just not like, it's not a trope in Junji Ito novels that I like a lot. There is multiple like deluded characters, and there's only one instance where I've actually liked that kind of character. So I don't like the particular trope with a lot of like the family tropes that Junji Ito does with like deluded or deranged or strange siblings, where one of them is much stranger than the others. It's like Junji Ito's version of the Addams Family, but it's just not fun. So I really don't like the strange Hikizuri siblings. I do, however, like Mansion of Phantom Pain and The Ribs Woman. Now, I think Mansion of Phantom Pain is like an allegory for chronic illness and living in chronic pain, and just something about it spoke to me a lot, and I really liked it, and I don't know why. And Ribs Woman I'd actually read prior to purchasing this book. I read it online, and it's actually pretty interesting. I don't know how much I enjoy it. In terms of visually I actually very much like The Ribs Woman. It's very similar to the fashion model, but out of this, my favorite story is The Mansion of Phantom Pain, which feels like an allegory for chronic illness. And in terms of Love Sickness itself, it is actually a pretty decent story. It takes a new trope on like the romance genre. I guess it's like Junji Ito's version of doing a romance story, I guess. Out of all of them, I actually think Love Sickness is probably the most mid. Like, it's good, but the strange Hikizuri siblings ruin it for me. And that's why out of 5, Love Sickness is getting put in 5th place. Now, moving on to Frankenstein. This was the first Junji Ito book that wasn't Junji Ito's Kato Yonamu that I picked up and actually read, because it was Frankenstein and I was learning about the actual Mary Shelley Frankenstein. This is Junji Ito's adaptation of it, and now that is only for the first, I want to say, 190 pages. And I actually really like this because it gave me the like inspiration to read more Junji Ito novels because of its second story, Next Spectre. Now, The stories of Next Spectre, Pen Pal, Intruder, The Strange Tale of Oshikiri, and Strange Tale of Oshikiri The Walls, all of those is one big like narrative behind this character of Oshikiri. And it's very episodic, and that's what I like about it, about the Tale of Oshikiri. It's essentially like a multiple universes type scenario, so you don't exactly know which version of Oshikiri is like the version you read in Next Spectre. You don't know which one is which, and it's very, very interesting. And I just noticed Junji Ito uses the Strange Tale, or the English translation of the Strange Tale is used quite a lot for Junji Ito. There's also the Hell of the Doll Funeral, face firmly in place, which is fucking horrifying, personally, as someone who doesn't like medical stuff and has to do medical stuff a lot. Face firmly in place, no. Boss Non is 2 stories about a dog, which I find very funny. Personally, Next Spectre is, I don't know why I'm saying Next Spectre like that. Next Spectre is personally my favourite story from Frankenstein, and it has a very like soft place in my heart because it's the first like Junji Ito story where I was like, oh, you know? You always remember your first scare, that kind of stuff. So I think I'm gonna put this at a safe 3. I don't know if I like stuff more or less, but right now this is at a 3, whereas Love Sickness is definitely number 5. Okay, let's analyze what's in Smash, Shiver, and Deserter. Now, Deserter is the one that I've read the most recent, so I'll actually remember it. I didn't like Bio, so the stories that are in Deserter, because these are the 3 that actually are fully episodic in nature. They might have 1 or 2 stories that connect, but it won't be to the likes of Frankenstein or Love Sickness, nor will it be like the Strange Hikazuri siblings or the Oshikiri saga, essentially, in these novels. So Deserter has these stories. Biohouse, which I really didn't like. Face Thief was a little weird, and I'm pretty sure it's because these are some of the older Junji Ito stories. There is Where the Sandman Lives, which was a little bit terrifying. I don't like. A little bit terrifying. I like and also don't like the stories that Junji Ito does around sleep. It's kind of weird. The body horror of the guy turning inside out and the girl being dragged into him. Really, really gory, but interesting. Then is The Devil's Logic, which has to do around then is Long Hair in the Attic. I know Junji Ito is known for his body horror, but there's particularly a lot of like very hyper specific body horror in this, like where most of the stories are actually about bodies and like romance and stuff, particularly in Deserter. I didn't like the Reanimator's Sword. Scripted Love I also had read previously, wasn't the biggest fan of it. My Father's Love was quite horrifying. That's all I'm gonna say for that. Unendurable Labyrinth was also quite horrifying. Village of the Siren, I wasn't the biggest fan of Village of the Siren, mainly because it was very, very similar to Dissolving Classroom, where it like shot off in a direction really quickly, and the thing is they both shot off in the same direction to Satan and Hell, which I find very funny. Then is quite possibly the worst one, which is Bullied. Bullied is quite horrifying. Again, I had read it prior to getting this book. In terms of visual imagery, it is actually quite interesting. There's a lot of like romance stories in Deserter, and then even Deserter itself technically is a romance. Oh, sorry, I say romance. Elements of romance, like people going on dates and being in love and stuff, and then all going to shit. There's a lot of that in Deserter. Personally, Deserter, I don't know. I think I have to look through Smashed and Shiver. I know first of all Shiver has the painter in it from Tomie, so it's getting doctored for points there because I've already gone through Tomie. I don't need a story that's already been used. It was kind of a bland start with used record. Shiver, anyone who is I think it's trypnophobic, will not like Shiva. The fashion model is pretty fucking good. I will say that. The fashion model, I need to put this image on the screen because I saw it and I was just like, accuracy. The accuracy. We know who the fashion model is based off of now. Anyway, Hanging Blimp. Hanging Blimp is quite, yeah, it's pretty disturbing. Marionette Mansion, yeah, Painter, we already know that. The Long Dream, fucking horrifying. Fucking horrifying. As someone who sleeps a lot, The Long Dream and the imagery of the guy when he's in the dreams that feel like they're 1,000 years long and he takes longer and longer to wake up. I really don't like that thing. Honored Ancestors and Greased. Oh, Greased is fucking disgusting on the same level as Gyo. Honored Ancestors is pretty gross. I think these are the more like physically disturbing stories personally. Obviously, like the ones that I kind of like is like the fashion model, Hanging Blimp, and yeah, I think I have to put Shiver at number 4. I think Shiver has to be number 4, mainly because while this is Junji's like most well-renowned works, and like obviously The Long Dream and all that, terrifying, I think it's more like shock factor stories in here, which gives it less like story beats personally. And again, once again, Tommy is already in it, Doctor's Point, so I think I have to put it above Love Sickness but under Frankenstein at number 4, which leaves Smashed. Now, will Deserter be the top because it's more recent, or will Smash be the top? I remember really liking Smashed, and I'm pretty sure this is the one where the fashion model comes back. If not, I just read that by itself. Bloodsucking Darkness is about bats. Wasn't really an issue. It's about bats, and I think the little bling 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 is actually very cute. Also kind of horrifying. Ghosts of Primetime. Raw is quite horrifying because it's flooding and all that, and it's not. It's deals with like national parks, ghosts, flooding, all things I don't like. Earthbound is also quite terrifying personally, that I actually really like. Death Row Doorbell, we're in like death row, get punished and keep appearing at someone's door. It is quite a horrifying concept, but the one that I want to talk about is The Mystery of the Haunted House. This series, these two like story series, which is obviously The Mystery of the Haunted House and The Mystery of the Haunted House Soichi's version, and then going into the character of Soichi. And this is where the what's her name? The fashion model comes back in. This is sort of the only example of the like quirky family that I really like, because it takes a character that gets established in other stories, puts it with an already pre-established character, and makes an absolutely terrifying mongrel of a child. That is the only version of the crazy child trope that I like, because it's an actual murderous piece of shit. And when I saw this image for the first time, it was fucking terrifying. I'll tell you that now. It's like a rabid dog. I do also like Soichi as a character being a bit of a shithead and then like not getting his way ever. I think that's pretty funny, honestly, for a horror character at least. The Mirror Valley is a little bit weird. Then there's the fucking library one. Oh, and the song that's stuck in the bitch's head. Smashed actually sent me through a loop as well. I actually really liked Smashed quite a bit. So yeah. Personally, in terms of plot, Smashed has a lot more plot-rich stories. Shiver is more like gore, personally. Frankenstein probably is my favorite of the other ones. So out of Deserter and Smashed, I probably would put Smashed over Deserter, but Deserter does get second place for me. So in terms of the collections, this is how these are all upside down. You're gonna have to live with it. We have Smashed, Deserter, Frankenstein, Shiver, and then Lovesickness. This is my preferred way of the books, and it actually looks good stacked like this. What the fuck? The color, I accidentally color coded it from cool colors to warm colors. How the fuck did I do that? I don't know. Anyway, so in terms of like, see, the thing is, in terms of ranking them all together, Frankenstein will be higher because Frankenstein is obviously a story that like I care about because it's like nostalgia from when I first started reading Junji Ito. But like at the same time, like a lot of these wouldn't, it's very complicated. My brain does not, my brain ordering them all together wouldn't be the same as ordering them all apart. In terms of all together, Uzumaki and Tomiya would still be number 1 and number 2. For an overall ranking of all of the Junji Ito novels, it's going to be different than how I've ranked it separately, because in personal preference, it will also have to do with like nostalgia stuff and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of my top 10, top 11, has to be top 11. But in terms of what order would I give my favorite Junji Ito novels, it would be number 1 Uzumaki, number 2 Tomiya, or number 1 Tomiya or number 2 Uzumaki. I really don't care which order these two are in. It will then be probably Frankenstein for the nostalgia factor, followed by Deserter because it's the most recent one that I've read and smashed, then followed by Gyo and Junji Ito's Cat Diary. Again, these can be interchangeable. Then followed by Lovesickness, Shiver or Shiver and Lovesickness, The Dissolving Classroom, and at the very last, Censor. I really don't like Censor. But yes, that has been my video for today. Mimikyu thanks you for being a part of this video and watching this video. And I do too. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on a Monday of all days because I wanted to upload it on Halloween, and that's what I've done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my makeup, and I will see you all next time. I will see you all on Wednesday. So yeah, if you could please like and subscribe, that would be great. I really want to hit that 1,000 subscriber mile mark. I am very tired. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!